so my name is Nadiia Usenko. I'm a Ukrainian squash player. I started playing squash when I was 9 years old. I competed in many European junior tournaments, reaching number one in each age category. I'm also 7 times national Ukrainian champion. I played in the national team, uh, twice played for the World Games, and after finishing my junior career in Europe, I came to the US to study Trinity College, played for the Bantams 4 years, and now I graduated in 2022. And since then, I was serving as an assistant squash coach for men's and women's teams at Amherst College.
I was in Trinity College in the summer. I met
Nice.
Coach Paul, and I think when he sees the video, he must be very proud of
Okay.
his player being also on this interview. Okay, so I've listed some questions to chat with you. The first one, how would you say, to squash beginners or people who are interested in playing squash but not yet? So how would you describe this sports of squash to people who are new to it?
Yes, so squash is a very fast-paced and exciting sport. It might be a little bit overwhelming at the beginning because of the ball going in all the directions, but you should definitely not be discouraged by it. Squash is also very suitable for absolutely everyone who plays them. So you can find the strategies based on your natural strengths and really adapt and explore it the way you want it. So there is no only one right answer to the question how to play squash. And I think this is incredible compared to, for example, rowing, when there is only one way you can row and it's very precise criteria. In squash, you can experiment.
And you mentioned that you started squash at 9 years old. I'm just
Yeah.
curious about what other sports did you do before you started squash?
Yeah, so my first sport was tennis. I did play tennis since I was 5 for 2 years. And then I got bored and I told my parents that, oh, I don't like it anymore. I don't want to do it. And they let me be. So then I explored different other sports, including badminton, swimming. And then when I got into squash when I was 9, I actually came back to tennis. And I did tennis, squash, and swimming for 2 years from 9 to almost 12. And only when I was 12, I decided, okay, I want to get better in squash. And I chose it because of its fast pace. And also, I didn't like being outside in the under the sun like in tennis. So I really appreciated squash being an indoor sport.
Yeah. So from that kind of very diverse athletic background you have had, I guess this will help you. This did help you in a squash journey. So what do you think about kids? What age do you think they should probably consider starting one sports versus trying all kinds of different sports? Because you kind of committed to squash at year 12. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so probably try many different things before 12 years old. Would that be something you recommend parents and juniors to consider?
When you introduce different sports to your kids, if they find something that is very exciting for them, it's totally fine to stick with this as long as they enjoy it. If you think you can show them different kind of sports, not just racket sports, but also swimming or running, hiking, climbing, it will also help them to develop and be and understand who they are as a person as well through different experiences. I know a lot of very good and professional players who started squash at age of 10 or 14 even. So I don't realistically think there is that age when it's too late, as long as you've been active and explore different sports before. So yes, absolutely, you can start as early as 5 years old, but don't get discouraged when you're already 14 and you think it's too late. It's not the case.
Yeah, that's cool. I was talking to a squash coach here, and I was just sharing with him that fencing is very big in many countries. And one of my friend, his son is doing fencing. He is 8 years old, and she was asking me whether she can get her son to try squash in conjunction to the fencing practice. And the coach I met today, he told me, fencing, the footwork is very useful, very important.
Yeah.
So if you have a fencing background, actually that can really help you in the squash, because squash is also a lot of footwork.
Yes, yes. It even looks a little bit familiar to us if you watched, for example, Olympics fencing and you see this last step or approach
Yeah.
Definitely the same muscles are engaged, and there are some stuff that you can transfer from both fencing to squash and from squash to fencing.
Yeah, thank you. My next question would be, what are your top advice? Because you come from very successful junior squash experience. If you look back at your junior years, what would you suggest for, I would say middle schoolers and high schoolers to keep in mind when they are navigating the whole squash journey? Because they need to balance school and squash and training. And yeah, what would you suggest them to keep in mind when they are like in the middle school or maybe also in the high school?
So I have two main advices. Number one is not to compare yourself to others. You want to compare your own progress based on who you were previously. Sometimes it's very easy to fall into comparing yourself to your peers, to your friends, or some people that you play at the tournaments and get discouraged thinking that you're behind and you're not advanced as fast as they are. But this is not the case. We might have all similar goals, but very different journeys. So really focusing more on yourself and how you progress as an individual. And the second advice would be to take care of your body. Squash is brutal and you can get injured at any point of your career. Um, Take off-court work serious because that off-court work will really, really help you to improve on-court, including stretching, mobility, strength and conditioning, basic fitness, flexibility. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I was just 1 hour ago, I was talking to Coach Nick Taylor, and he gave me one advice to share with parents, which I think he will share by himself later on. That's it's not just the quantity of time you spend on court that matters, it's the quality of time of your training hours.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when sometimes we talk a lot about quality to our students when we mention in solo. You can stay there for 2, 3 hours, but if you're not doing stuff intentionally with low quality, it will not result in good outcomes.
Yeah. So I like your first point of just don't compare yourself with others, but compare yourself with your previous self. That means every shot you take, every movement you take, or every what do you call that tactics you use, just compare, make sure this better than the previous one, not better than the other person's.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very nice. Thank you. My next question is, yeah, because I know college squash is big in the US. There are so many universities, college, I think that in total 34, right? Is that
Yeah,
number right?
varsity teams, yes, yes.
Varsity teams, yeah. So it's very, I think, one of the most active, I would say, systems for squash in the world. Talking about, levels of participation, skill level, but also I think impact it has on the global squash community. But most of us may not be very familiar with this whole squash, college squash system. If you have to give us a very quick introduction about what is the U.S. college squash system in a nutshell, but not in very details, but what is it and how often do you play, and how fun it is and how brutal it can be.
Yes, so college squash is a competitive squash league in collegiate level in the United States. We actually have one Canadian team as well, which is pretty cool. Uh, the the season length and duration and the amount of matches can vary based from one school to another, but in general, we start playing the matches in the middle of November. We go through the beginning of December, then there's a short break for exams and Christmas break, and then teams are back on campus, and the majority of matches are happening in January and February. And then the national championship happens by the end of the February, first week of March, which completes our season.
Okay, so it's a very busy season. It's like this from November all the way to March, right? Which is the
Pretty much,
championship.
yes.
Okay, that's like a half year, less than half year, kind of 5 months.
Yes, there is a pretty big, well, there is a break in December, as I mentioned,
Mm.
including the exam period and Christmas break, but some teams can come back from this Christmas break as soon as on 27th of December. Some other teams may come back on the 3rd of January. It really depends on your program and your schedule. We're pretty busy. We are packed with our matches for Amherst College. We have, I cannot, around definitely like 15 to 20 matches we need to play during regular season, and then we will be having conference championships and going into nationals.
Wow. Wow. And if you look at the college squash, for example, during the season, how many hours of training are usually in place for a player in a week, for example?
So, for example, our practice structure is to have 5 squash sessions per week. It's usually one session is 1 hour and a half. On top of that, students have strength and conditioning, fitness sessions 3 times per week. And then you can have 2 matches Saturday, Sunday, or 3 matches, for example, Friday to Sunday. The next day would be usually off, and then you continue with that.
Yeah, I just did a quick math. It's about 12 hours, roughly, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not
It's
as quick as Mesh as you are, so
roughly maybe 1 hour and a half and times 5 days and plus some, conditioning. I think roughly about 10. I think it varies from person to person. But I
absolutely,
think it
because
should,
people can also go to solo practice, or when I was a student, I was as well practice with additional sessions with assistant coach, for example, in the morning, or with some of my teammates to go and have an additional session. Yeah,
yeah, I think it's a challenge for people to really make sure that their academics and their training and their tournaments, are in good system, so they can really do well on all these important aspects of a student.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's all about priorities. So if you really know what you
Mhm.
want to get from squash and academic, it is very doable, and you can still
Mhm.
have 8 hours of sleep. You can still be successful in the classroom and on the court.
Yeah, I learned that 4S. One is sleep at the bottom. That's the foundation. Then you got the study. Then you have the social, and now maybe on top you can put squash, or you can change. But that's all the key things you need to really look into your time management.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know every year you are also being in the process of recruiting and also interviewing, possible appropriate level players to join our college. So I'm just want to also ask you, when you are looking at candidates, what are I would say the top 3 or 4 attributes you will say, hey, this is my sort of checklist when you are recruiting someone? What is a priority list to consider in the recruitment process?
Well, when we are recruiting a person, first of all, we're looking at them as an individual. We really think about their personality. Will they fit at our campus? Is our college is the right place for them? Will they fit into team culture? So first of all, we want to get to know you as a person, and of course, it will happen through Zoom calls and text and keep communication. Then, of course, we want to see how you play squash, and especially how do you handle pressure. So we want to see you at the tournaments, if there's any recordings of your matches, and even if this match you lost, but we could see how you responded to the pressure. It is much more valuable information for us. Um, and after that, we want to know what you want from the team and from the coaches. What are your goals? And this will really help us to understand if we want you as a player, or maybe our college is not exactly the best place for you, because first, we want to provide the best experience possible to the student athletes. So if we know that there's some other place that will suit you better, we will not try to keep you only to ourselves.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Um, I think teamwork is a key word, even though squash is an individual sport. But when they are joining a college varsity team, they are, training with their peers. They need to work with the coach. I think some level of leadership, some level of emotional intelligence, and teamwork spirit is sort of important, I think.
Yes, it's important, and we do have most of the students joining us without experiencing being on a team. There are some students who are in high school and they play in high school team, but most of the people, especially internationals, if they were not on the national team, they don't know what team culture is about. And especially even if you were on the national team, it's usually 4 to 5 people. This is a much larger group. We have 9 people on the main lineup. For example, right now we have 13 women and 16 men on the team. So it's a pretty large group, and you really need to know how to communicate with everyone to make everyone's life better.
Yeah. Talking about high school sort of squash experience, you mentioned just now some of the college players they have had the high school experience. Some may not have. Um, how would a high school U.S. high school squash experience benefit them in terms of getting to college squash, if at all? Because there are certain, U.S. high school squash players. They have been in the system for some time in the U.S. They play high school leagues, and there are other players who are coming from out of the U.S. high school squash system.
Yeah, so I don't think it will necessarily benefit them in recruiting. It can make their adjustment a little bit smoother and transition into the college because they are already on the team, maybe smaller, but they know the vision of how the squash team is structured and functions, and they might be already familiar with the education system in the US if it's even some international students come over to go to the school in the high school in the US. But the only advantage is for us coaches to see you play in person. We will be going to some high school nationals as well. They happen in March or February. I'm confusing sometimes. So it happen. We will be watching some of those matches, and we can see it in person. And this is the only advantage of being in high school in the US. But again, if you have all the videos from other matches that you play overseas, this is also very valuable for us in the recruiting process.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Talking about looking at different players play, tournaments or matches. I know there are different styles of playing. Yeah, some are very hard hitters, runners. Some are really smart and just they're more skillful and more deceptive. Um, in your mind, what are the sort of the style? What is your style, for example? I'm just curious. What is your style of play? And when you are working with players, for example, uh, how do you see those different styles can really achieve their high level of squash? Uh, I'm just curious in terms of your style and in terms of how you see other styles in general.
Yes, so definitely before, for the longest part of my career, I was a runner. I was fit, I was fast, so I was using this to my own advantage. I was never very good in some kill shots or nick or trick shots or anything. I didn't have the best hands, so I really needed to run and recover a lot of shots to keep in the rally. When I coach other people, I absorb them as the whole player. So this is not just one way you can play. I present them different options of what they can do. And I listen to their feedback. And sometimes, yes, if you're the best here, maybe you don't need to move as much, but still fitness is important for other reasons to keep your body safe and healthy. So I really think about all the different options that I can give to my athletes, and I don't limit myself of coaching just in one style because it will be unfair.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's fair to say every style probably can play well and even very well. They just need to be aware of their strength and their weakness and just have a complete sort of plan to use their strengths, but also to cover their weakness in a way that will not be the derailer for them.
Yeah, absolutely. They should be aware of themselves and of the players they play against because their structure and their style can work very effectively against one certain type of opponents, but not over the others, and then they might need to adjust. So I think adjustability is another big concept that if you try and you see it doesn't work, you should adjust within the game and don't wait to come out of the game and then ask the coach like, oh, what was happening? So we're really working on that as well to allow our students to assess their own performance within the game and make different and try different things to find out what is the best solution.
Yeah, I really like the word adaptability. For me, there's another word called agility. Somebody said agility is flexibility with a purpose. So you
Yeah, that's
know why you need to be agile, why you need to adjust. But I think that's very powerful. So it's not something you have to rely on someone. You can also help yourself to be more adaptive, to be more agile. So you have been, how long have you been a coach, by the way? I'm just,
It will be my third season with Amherst College. Before
okay.
that, during my student athlete career at college, I was also coaching back home in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I would say starting from 2020, that's when I was actively engaged in coaching.
Yeah, but I think that 4 years has been very intense, and you probably have met many, many players at different levels, in different clinics, in different high school and universities in general.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
what would be your top two tips for coaches? If you think about being a coach, probably you have learned this from other coaches as well. But if you want to pass on some wisdom that you learn from others, what would be the top two coaching tips?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, but you really want to get to know your athlete. You want to know what their goals are, what their dreams are, what they like, what they don't like, to really make the best experience possible for them. There's many different things that can influence the athlete's ability or behavior on court, and sometimes it's not their fault. And just because your approach didn't work at first, maybe it's not because of the athlete. They're trying their best, but you should again adjust to the needs of the athlete. There will be one thing. And the second thing for coaches is to keep learning, to keep studying, learning, finding new ways, new look into science as well, different model learning theories, psychology, biomechanics, all of that stuff is very important. It can really influence your coaching style in the future and help you.
Yeah, I think Coach Paul would be very happy to hear this because your first point is very similar to what he shared with me because I was asking the same question.
Oh,
He
really?
used the word called empathy. Just put yourself in the shoes of your player, try to be empathetic, try to read their facial expressions, try to understand them, what's behind what you can normally see. I think a certain level of caring and empathy will help to connect with the player. Um, then you can be challenging, you can be demanding, right?
Definitely.
But I really also like your second point of keep learning. I think the whole squash world is changing fast, and I think new generation of players are probably different from previous generations, and there are new ways of understanding about how body works, how brain works. I really like that because I think that's really the fun part of squash because squash is not triathlon. Squash is not just swimming, running, but all the other sports will need your brain. But I think squash will need your brain more.
Yes, I think a lot of people were saying and referring to squash as the chess with the racket. Yes.
Yeah, chess on the legs or chess with
Yeah.
rackets, indeed.
Yeah.
My very last question to you is: if you're coming from Ukraine and you've been, competing in European tournaments, now in the US, but also I'm sure you know that Egypt is the leading country for squash now, right? And some top players from professional and also in some university players. How would you see this global different styles by country, like European squash? I mean, Europe is big, but very traditional British. I know Poland is doing very well on squash and US, Egypt, because in the university, you probably see different nationalities of players. They come into play in the US. How would you see the current landscape of styles of squash and development of this kind of squash from your perspective in different countries?
Well, it's a hard question, but I actually think that the margin between the countries is getting smaller and smaller because before I felt like with previous generation, I would say there was bigger differences between the styles. Again, as you said, from country to or per country or continent to continent. Right now, sport is much more physical, much more aggressive. Uh, no one wants to just play English lengths and stay at the back of the court. Everyone is looking for opportunities to attack. I'm very amazed with the junior level of the US right now when I go to all these tournaments and I feel like, oh, Europe is in trouble, for sure. And there's a lot of hardworking individuals here that will show what squash is in the next 3, 4, 5 years. So Definitely it becomes more attacking, but because of that, it is much more tactical now as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think 3, 4 years will be Olympics, right? So that's the time when US will shine,
Yes.
in their homeland. Yeah. Well, very last thing, Finding Squash is a platform we try to empower and connect players, clubs, schools, hopefully across nation, across continents. Anything you want to wish to our Finding Squash community members in the world, like they are in China, Korea, Egypt, US, in many different countries for squash, junior squash players.
Junior squash players, all right. I really wish that you will find community within your squash journey and the people that you can rely on and ask for advice, and as well the people you can give back to. So I want you to think of squash as not just one way of communication, but both ways of communication. When you meet new people, share your experience with them, and also know how to listen and to get them to know them.